Thanks. Kent, are you doing the introduction? I should have asked that before.
Oh, I don't think so. Do you want me to? I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Sure.
I didn't think about that.
Welcome everybody to the first breakout session of the virtual PBIS National Leadership Forum. My name is Kent McIntosh. I'm one of the co-directors of the center. If you're joining us, you probably just saw a wonderful keynote from Dr. George Sugai. This session is intended to be kind of a follow-on or companion session to Dr. Sugai's keynote. And I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Tamika LaSalle from the University of Connecticut, who is going to share what I think is going to be a really wonderful session, partially reacting to George's keynote and also sharing her own experiences. So without further ado, I want to give the rest of the time to Dr. Tamika LaSalle.
Hi, good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone. Thank you for joining. As Kent said, I'm gonna kind of piggyback off of George's PowerPoint or George's presentation and really talk about my own experience relative to Black Lives Matter in the current context and how that relates to schools. I'll talk a little bit about a call to action from an interpersonal perspective, what we can do as individuals, and then George will join in and have some final comments, and then we'll open it up for questions. So I start off by saying, how did we get here? Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Philando Castile, Breonna Taylor, Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, Botham Jean, and so many other names that never made it to newspaper, to Twitter, to the headlines. When I say, how did we get here? I mean, how did we get here? How did a group of adults gathered trying to figure out how to stop violence, inequities, and unjust practices against Black people in America? It seems that every time an event like this happens, it makes the news. There's this moment when social media erupts and they're blasted with equity quotes. We see protests in the streets. The phones and emails of Black folks are blown up by white peers and colleagues reaching out to say, I'm sorry, I'm here if you need me. And Black people must work to hold it together in the midst of a community that's seemingly falling apart. The news only highlights things that have been happening in various waves for hundreds of years, from slave ships to corporate offices. What's different now? The ability to get it on tape, the ability to get it on Twitter or on Instagram, and even that hasn't been enough to hold people accountable for the crimes against innocent Black people. So again, I ask, why are we here? It's difficult for me, or be remiss of me, to not talk a little bit about my own experience and how all of these things make me reflect on my own family and the impact that it's had as I talk more broadly about the impact on education. I think about first my twin brother, who's an avid runner, has run dozens of half marathons, ran the New York Marathon, and he's always been a runner. And even when I run with him, my brother always says to me, whatever you do, don't stop. And I always think about that in my head. When I want to walk, he says, even if you slow down, don't stop. And it's really telling, because that's so relevant today, given the current context and everything that's going on, that I know that no matter what I do, I can't stop this work. But my brother goes out and runs. And for the first time this spring, he told me he went out to go run and he was telling my mom he was going to run. And my mom said, be careful. Instead of her saying, beat your last time or have fun, she said, be careful, because of what happened to Ahmaud Arbery. Because my brother just wants to go out and run And now there's a fear about what could happen to him. My partner, working on his dissertation at a Starbucks about an hour south of Atlanta, Georgia, for hours, got cold, went to his car to get his jacket. A couple minutes later, the police pull up because someone had called the police on him because they thought he engaged in suspicious activity. He was working on his dissertation. My sister, she's the president at UPS. And I asked my sister, can you tell me about an incident or a time where you felt like race had an impact on your job, on your everyday life? And my sister actually said to me, I don't know if I can think about a time. I don't know if I blocked that out. And her saying that is just as telling as her being able to name an incident. It's sort of this survival mode that I think Black people have to move into. Because when things do happen, we're questioned, are you sure that it wasn't because of this? Are you sure that they didn't mean that? And so we have this conversation about these subtleties that happen, these microaggressions, but we've been sort of programmed to question ourselves instead of questioning the people that are doing them. My brother, my mom, my stepfather, and my dad all served in the military. For 20 plus years, my mom retired as a sergeant major. They've been deployed more times than I can count. There are so many times I had to live with other family members so that my mom and my family could go fight for a country, even though our own won't fight for us. So I look at my family and I think of all the things that we've accomplished, of all the things that we've tried to contribute back to this culture, to this country. When we walk out the house, it doesn't matter. We still can't walk around in hoodies. We still have to be careful when we drive at night. We still have to be afraid when our children go to school. Because when I get pulled over, I still get asked, where are you going? Is this your car? What do you do? And so I think about that and why this has to be the story of not just my life, but other lives. When you think about the accumulation of this impact, we have to talk about systemic racism, defined as the manifestation of white supremacy and white superiority that's evident in everyday systems and processes. I grew up as a military brat, so my first 6.5 years I lived in Germany. So I didn't know what being Black in America was like until I was probably 7 and I moved to Alabama. And I remember one of the first things I learned was the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But I also learned in 3rd grade that that wasn't something that applied to everyone. One specific incident, a pencil went missing in class and a student 2 chairs away accused me of stealing the pencil. I was the only Black student, and they went through all of my things, searched through all of my things the teacher did. I had nothing to do with it. And it ended up that the student was sitting on their own pencil, but I was the target of it because something was missing. I was the only Black kid. So we talk about systemic racism. It's beyond these individual acts. It's how society operates as a whole, how we see Black boys and Black girls. It's embedded in normal practices. And it's really critical to understand that point because it's not just what happens day to day, it's how that accumulates over time and how that system has served some and not served others. We see this in different ways. It happens at the conscious and the unconscious level. Even if individuals don't see themselves as racist, white people likely still benefit from a system that that elevates white faces and voices while systematically suppressing those of Black individuals. In education, when we look at our schools, we see different resources. I taught in Atlanta, Georgia, and if you go to one end of the county, the schools are beautiful. The resources are in abundance. Technology is high tech. They're advanced courses. In the same district on the other side of the city, you see dilapidated school buildings, old textbooks. They don't have access to advanced courses. We see our education system not being equal or equitable for all students. Hiring practices. Do I have to worry about my name on a resume? Do I have to worry about someone meeting a quota? What does that mean? And then when we think about unequal pay and how that has an impact on individuals, individually, but again, collectively. The criminal justice system, innocent until proven guilty, has not been applied to all. How little boys and little girls have to be afraid of the police at such a young age. And lastly, access. Access to healthcare, access to housing, access to banking. The pandemic has only highlighted things that those of us in education have known, that there are these gross inequities that have happened in minoritized communities, in the Black community. And now everyone is seeing what we have seen in our schools, in our streets, in our neighborhoods for years and years and years. We see the disproportionality that happens amongst Black students. We've often talked about the school to prison pipeline. I'll get into that in a second, but one of the things that has come up in the last several years is though Black students make up 19% of the preschool population, they make up 47% of those receiving one or more suspensions. We're talking about preschool students being suspended from school. They're 3.8 times more likely to receive at least one out of school suspension and 2.5 times more likely to be referred to law enforcement or arrested at school. We see these education gaps. At 4th grade, we see 28 points on the national tests. And what we know about 4th grade and 3rd grade tests is this is what our society uses to predict the amount of prisons that are needed, that are overwhelmingly filled with Black individuals. This isn't an opportunity, an achievement gap, though. It's an opportunity gap, because how can we call an achievement gap when students have not had the same opportunities to learn, to be successful, to thrive? When we think about what does that look like in terms of getting referrals or suspensions, the big things that come up is that oftentimes we see that students are being penalized in areas that are most subjective in these categories. Defiance, disrespect, disruptive. I could ask 10 people right now, what does that mean? And we all might have different definitions. We fail to recognize the cultural context of our students and our families and use that information to inform practices. Instead, we have focused historically on a deficit-based model instead of thinking about a strengths-based perspective. How do we learn about the ways that our students communicate? And just because it's different from these white middle-class norms does not make it negative. How do we learn about the needs that our students have, the ways that they express knowledge, the ways that they learn knowledge? How do we take the time to do that instead of punishing students for being who they are? Again, when we think about the school to prison pipeline, it's really focused on the exclusion of Black and brown kids in school that overwhelmingly results in students being put into the criminal justice system. And the scary part is, like I said a minute ago, this is starting to happen at even the preschool level. Preschool kids starting the school to prison pipeline. So when we say that there is an equity in education, this isn't something that is just a feeling. This isn't anecdotal. This is data-based. This is something that is easy to find, but that we haven't always been willing to see. It's important, again, for us to recognize that Black bodies are policed in the streets and in the classroom, and that it's our responsibility to take a look at ourselves to finally say, how are we going to change this?
The movement is a rhythm to us.
See, freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition to us. So justice for all, it's not specific enough. This isn't one incident. These are things that happen over and over again. That's why Rosa sat on the bus. That's why we walked through Ferguson with our hands up. They say stay down and we stand up. Their lives matter. My life matters. Your life matters. My nieces and my nephews who are going through school, they shouldn't have to worry about being afraid of the police. They shouldn't have to worry about being criminalized. They shouldn't have to worry about being arrested in school. You look at these innocent faces and how can we not want a system that works for everyone? How can we look at these faces and not want to do better, specifically for Black children? What has happened is this erasure of Black childhoods. Why is it that a 5-year-old, 4-year-old is marching in the street saying, no justice, no peace? When this first came about, it seemed to be really cute that you see this little girl who is really fighting in the street saying, no justice, no peace, but she's 5. Why is the innocence taken away from a 5-year-old? Why can't we restore that so that her biggest worry is about Paw Patrol or Sesame Street and not marching in the street for her family members? You see in this video in the right-hand corner, this little boy playing basketball in his own front yard. He hides behind this car. Why? Because a police car drives by. And then he goes out and play. Why is it that Black children are afraid of police officers when all he's doing is playing basketball in his front yard? In this last video, you see the police trying to reassure this young girl that we're not here to hurt you. You can protest, you can do whatever you want, just don't break nothing. Even that qualifier, just don't break nothing, is still a subtle message to Black people that as long as you stay within these lines, then you'll be okay. But for us, what has happened, what has been illustrated in the police violence and criminality is that either you stay within these lines or there's going to be the extreme, and that there's no gray area that has been allotted to Black children. So when we have to have conversations about what do you want to be when you grow up, kids have to think about, I just want to be alive. I don't know if I'm going to make it to 16 or 17 or to 22 or 23. I was just walking through my neighborhood. I was just asleep in my house. I just went for a run. I was breaking up a fight. I was arrested for something that I didn't do. And we have to think about this. Is this something that all children share? Is this an experience that everyone shares? It's not. And so people often ask, well, why do we say Black Lives Matter? What's the logic behind that? The best way I can explain it is if you think about a house and you think about a neighborhood and all the homes on the neighborhood, one would argue that no matter what home you live in, you all matter. That I'm not going to put one family in front of the other. But when we think about the homes of Black families, if you see a house that's on fire, when the fire department comes, you're not going to say, go to this house and this house and this house. You're going to say, go to the house that's on fire. That's the Black house. Another Black family whose house is on fire, whose son got shot in the street. Another one who got arrested. Another one who was struck down by a stray bullet. These are Black homes that are on fire. So when we look at our communities, we cannot say that everyone is being treated fairly because Black houses are on fire. And not enough people, places, or processes are in place to stop those fires. And more importantly, to prevent them. So that's why we can't say all lives matter. Because all lives truly cannot matter until Black lives matter. We have to think about when we talk about racism and anti-racism and anti-Blackness, what does that mean? And it's time to have honest conversations about it. It's been time to have honest conversations about that. It's not enough to just not be racist. It's not enough to say my best friend is Black. It's not enough to say that I don't have any hate in my heart. It's not enough to just be a good person. By definition, to be racist is one who is supporting a racist policy through their actions or inactions, expressing racist ideas. Anti-racist is one who is supporting an anti-racist policy through their actions or inaction or expressing racist ideas. So the opposite of racist isn't not racist, it's anti-racist. There's a difference there. And I want to introduce one more term. When we talk about anti-Blackness, anti-Blackness extends beyond anti-racism. Because when we talk about racism and we talk about minoritized communities, we generally use this as a catch-all term that refers to all minoritized groups. And we can say in education, just like in anything else, at times it's important to talk about all groups, and at times it's important to be specific to groups. There are certain needs that all students have. There are certain needs that students with disabilities have. There are certain needs that students who are refugees have. There are certain needs that Black students have. So anti-Blackness is more than just us feeling Black in an anti-Black world. It's a framework that's been illustrated by society's inability to recognize the humanity of Black people, a disdain, a discard, a disgust for the existence of Black people. And so we have to think about anti-Blackness because we are specifically talking about the lives of Black girls and boys, women and men. The time is now. The time has been now. The luxury of ignorance or denial is not allotted to Black individuals, so why should it be allotted to anyone else? I can't turn the news off or turn the television off because those images are embedded in my heart and in my mind. It's something I have to think about on a daily basis. I was having a conversation with someone and they were saying, well, I have a lot going on, so I can't be bothered by politics and everything that's going on. Well, that's a luxury that I don't have because what happens on a day-to-day has implications for my life. I can't afford to be colorblind. Instead, I have to be the opposite. I have to be acutely aware of what being Black means in every setting and implications for that. When I walk into a room, when I walk into a store, when I walk into a neighborhood, I have to be aware of my surroundings. And I challenge you to think, how many times, regardless of what race you are, have you been in a situation where you were the only person of that race in a group of at least 30 people? That's almost a daily occurrence for Black people, for some Black people. And think about that. So again, when we think about the news, when we think about the images that have been shown over and over and over again, we all have to be aware of it. Because like I said, all lives can't matter until Black lives matter. And this is systemic racism. So this is something that takes everyone moving forward, not just specific groups. So what side of history will you stand on? Someone might ask, well, what are you asking of us? What is the ask? I'm not asking for you to feel my pain. You can't walk in my shoes. I don't expect that. The ask is for you to listen to the messaging, to review the data, to reevaluate your part, and then go back to your colleagues and your peers, your friends and family reunions. Go back to your institutions and your schools, your neighborhoods and businesses, and share what you've learned. The ask again is not that you feel our pain, but that you influence those who are responsible for, those who benefit from, and those who perpetuate it. And instead invoke change and action at the deepest level. So our Black students have a real chance at life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. So I'll talk about 2 or 3 things that I can recommend people do. Like I said, George talked about it within a larger context, and I'm thinking about it from this interpersonal perspective. If I were a teacher, if I'm an administrator, what is it that I can be doing? 1, be self-reflective. Recognize your privilege, your white privilege. Recognizing white privilege isn't in an effort to make you feel bad. It's in an effort to make you understand the power that you have to invoke change. Recognize your unconscious bias. Bias is difficult to address because it's just that, it's unconscious. So you have to be kind of more aware of what is the first thought that comes into your mind when you see a Black student walk into your class, when you hear a Black girl talking loudly down the hallway. We all have unconscious biases. It's inevitable. We can't erase that. I have them every day, but what I do is I'm very aware of the thought that I have, and I sort of describe this 2 to 3 second moment between that thought and my action, and that's where I look to change things. For example, after 9/11, the image of Muslim Americans was very negative. So if I got on a plane and I saw someone in a hijab, I might have this initial reaction based on the media, but then I say, Tamika, that's not realistic. And I move forward and I sit next to that person and I don't allow my fear or the negative imagery to take over. Reflect on your own actions as a teacher, as a friend, as a family member. We all have to think about what are the things that we've done to contribute to moving us forward, but probably an even more difficult conversation, what are the things that we've done that have stopped us from doing that and that have moved us in the opposite direction? There are many times where situations happen and I walk away and I say, I wish I would have spoken up. I wish I would have done something differently. I think we all have those moments. We're human. I want to do less and less of that, but it still allows me to be reflective. We cannot correct what we're not willing to confront. And if what's happened over the past several months has not swayed you into believing that the lives of Black people are in danger, then I don't know what other proof that you have, because this is something that's been happening forever. And I think, again, because it's been highlighted, we kind of are hypersensitive to it. And what I want is for us, for that hypersensitivity to not go away over time because the media coverage has changed. Because just because it's not in the media doesn't mean it's not in the streets. So talk about it with your students. Students notice race as young as 3. You've heard maybe of the doll studies where they had Black and white children choose their preference in doll. And both Black and white children had a preference for white doll. This is in the early 1960s, I believe. They repeated this study in 2010 and saw similar results. This preference for white. So kids see race. They ask, well, why is your skin color different than mine? What does that mean? So it's important for us to have conversations with students, to not take it for granted. There are so many different resources that are age appropriate. At the end of this presentation that I've shared, I have inserted several resources and hyperlinks that you can use to start the conversation. It's important to use and research resources. Use your professional learning networks within your building, within your structure. You don't have to do this alone. The expectation is not for you to do this alone as a teacher, as an administrator, as a school, as a district. Come together in community and discuss these things, because these are not always easy conversations, but they're necessary and they're mandatory, and people's lives depend on them. So we have to discuss race. We have to discuss equity. We have to discuss fairness. These are conversations that have been happening at the Black dinner table for generations and generations. These are conversations that should be happening everywhere. Because even if we don't, there's this big elephant in the room. And what we think is that, well, if we don't talk about it, then it's not happening. But your kids are showing up in school knowing what's happened over the past several months. This is a part of their lives. So if they show up and we don't acknowledge anything that's happened, then that's saying to them, I don't see you. I see past you. If we can't acknowledge the hurt and the pain as a result of the pandemic, as a result of the racial unrest, as a result of everything that's going on, then we cannot move forward with our students, because we're saying, I don't see you. And not only have they been affected, we've all been affected, regardless of your race, by everything that's going on. So we should all be having those conversations. Ibram Kennedy talks about being anti-racist, and if you look the definition up in Webster, they will describe being anti-racist as both a verb and a noun. And I focus today on it being a verb because it's important, again, for us to move in action, to unite or form a connection or relation. He allied himself to form or enter into an alliance. So what does that look like? Ibram talks about being anti-racist is not some tattoo that you wear where you say like, I'm anti-racist and that's just how it is. It's not some permanent thing that you are. Being anti-racist is something that is a decision that you make from day to day, from moment to moment in your decisions. So instead, it's really like wearing a name tag that can easily fall off, and you can waver back between being racist and anti-racist depending on the activities that you engage in. If you allow one form of injustice to happen, then you'll allow other forms of injustice to happen. It's like moving on that sidewalk at the airport where you can get on and you just kind of glide through. And some might say like, I'm not racist, I'm just like gliding through, and you're just this passive person. But to be anti-racist, you have to be moving at a faster pace than those who are racist. And you have to be willing to turn around and go back and rectify what has been wrong. So the call is for us to all look at anti-racism as a verb, as something that we should be doing, and a conversation that we should be having with ourselves on a regular basis. Be an ally. We've heard this term several times over the last several months. Some people use ally, some people use accomplice. I don't care what term you use, but the point is do something. First of all, listen. Instead of speaking for those who don't have a seat at the table, move over. Give them the mic. My early research, I used to title, I think even one of my articles was Missing Voices, because I thought I was elevating the voices of minoritized students through looking at school climate and equity work. And I realized I did part of that, but have since questioned even my methodology and thinking about how can I extend that, because I don't want to just speak for other people. I want them to be able to speak for themselves. And so in being an ally, I think people have referred to this term before and of instead of wanting to be Beyonce, be Michelle. And I think Kent McIntosh has actually referred to that. How do you support others in this process? You don't need to be Gladys Knight, be the Pips. How do we learn how to step back as white people or as a non-minority person and support us, and to listen first? Understand systemic racism beyond police brutality and headlines, because sometimes people have this narrowed idea that being racist is what happens in the headlines and it has to do with the police. No, it's happening all the time. So it includes that, but it's things that are happening in our lives every day. Peggy McIntosh, the invisible knapsack, she talks about these privileges that have been afforded to white people that you might not even be aware of. Have you ever had someone follow you in a store? Have you ever had someone cross the other side of the street when they saw you? Have you ever had someone assume that you were something that you weren't just because you were in a certain setting? Learn the full history. Read the research. Talk to Black people. And when I say that, the caveat here is when you come and talk to your Black colleagues and your friends. I talked about that early on. When things happen in the media, you get all these texts and Black people get these messages from white allies saying, I hear you and I'm here with you. Have the conversation, but instead show up with resources. Instead of coming to Black people and say, what can I do? Can you recommend a book? Can you tell me what to do? Show up with resources and then have the conversation. Because otherwise you add this Black tax to the community where we're already overwhelmed and then have to figure out a way to comfort or to support others in this process. So instead of putting the work on one person, let's all move together. And in the cases where students can't have the mic, speak up for Black students and Black colleagues. And your meetings, question the data, question the processes, act against injustice, challenge these things in our schools. When we think about education, of course, we want to think about hiring practices because representation does matter. We know that our teaching force is overwhelmingly white. Over 90% of administrators are white, and there's little space for minoritized administrators to enter into those spaces because of the systemic racism that has happened, because of the institutionalized racism that has happened in the behind the walls at board meetings, pushing people out while simultaneously pushing white people in. Reevaluate the curriculum. Are we telling the full story? Decolonize the curriculum. What is it that you're talking about in your class, and how is that reflective of the students that are there? Evaluate the equitable distribution of resources across schools, not equal, equitable. And we know that there's a difference. Increase access to AP and advanced placement courses because we know that those have correlations for students in college. We know that some students, they walk into the counselor's office, and Black students, and they don't even get to learn about the opportunities of scholarships. They don't know about SATs. They don't know about four-year universities because the counselors aren't talking about them with them. Instead, they have selected or have already predetermined the path that they think that they should go on. And no one's saying if a student wanted to go to a 2-year, a trade school, or 4-year, all of those are fine, but give the option. And for too long, Black students haven't been given the option. They haven't been given the opportunity. Vote, engage in political engagement. Doesn't matter who you vote for, vote, because we all have a voice. And that's important. If you want to have an opinion, then it's important to vote. Reevaluate the status quo. And I talked about this again, evaluating policies and thinking about what does it mean to be normal. One of my favorite quotes I learned my first year of grad school is, who defines the norm and hence the deviation? And I look at that as saying, what have we decided is normal in education in our society? And who has decided that? Traditionally, that's been white middle-class norms, but in a time where 54% of our public school population is representative of minoritized students, then what is norm or normal? And does everyone have to fit into this box? No, they don't. How can we allow for differences of thought? How can we allow for differences of expression? And really do what we say that we're going to do as educators, because no matter what side of the aisle we sit on, our responsibility as public educators is to make sure that all students have an equitable chance at success, have an equitable opportunity to be successful, and not to hoard certain opportunities for some students. I want to be clear, if I had the choice, I still choose Black. I love my Black people. We love being Black. We love our culture. We love what we stand for. We love what we have to offer. All we want is for you to love us back, to respect us back, and to treat us in the same way that you would want your brother, your sister, your son, your daughter, your mother, your father to be treated. Thank you. I'll allow George to step in. Like I said, there will be resources that are available in the PowerPoint. And I think we'll share this at the end.
Cool. Thank you, Tamika. I really did appreciate that. What we decided to do is I'd like to make a couple comments in response to what Tamika has presented. Then I'll turn it back to Kent, who will kind of be the funnel for the questions and comments to each of us. I know there's lots of thoughts out there, lots of suggestions, lots of comments, and we'll give him sort of the opportunity to funnel those through so we can be a little bit more strategic about it. First of all, I just want to say that every time I hear Tamika speak, I learn something new about myself. And I think that's an important message because it's not learning about Tamika per se, it's about learning about the interaction or relationship we have with others. And the comment that I'd really like to make is that there are systems and practices out there which represent the opportunities that are available to some and not all, which is what Tamika is one of the messages I come away with from her. And I'd just like to be able to say that this notion of privilege and opportunity is one that we should all be thinking carefully about. I think about opportunity and privilege as being not only the sort of the physical or the opportunities within organizations, but it's the knowledge we have, it's the skills that we have access to, it's the opportunity to use those skills. It's not equal across the different groups. And I think that's important for us. And I would love for each of you to think about what Tamika said from your own personal perspective, which is what I got in listening to Tamika about how do I take the privileges that I have and use those to improve my own ability in my words, my vision, my actions. I also think about opportunities being another level, which is how do we make sure that what we have with respect to opportunity is helping others to see what their opportunities are and what they can do with that. You know, how can they take advantage of the opportunities that are available to give opportunities to others who may not have them? And that's words and it's actions again. The third thing I want to kind of say is that I think this opportunity is not only at the individual level for personal gain, but it's also for others, but it's also for those systems that are out there. We have systems that are inherently not sensitive to the opportunities that are available to all, and especially those that have been disenfranchised. And we have the opportunity ourselves to be able to make those changes occur. It really troubles me that there are individuals out there who have to be careful and different about how they move through the environment, the social environment, physical environment, because of something that characterizes who they are. And I think we have this opportunity to be able to ally or to advocate and to be out there actively and intensively and deliberately trying to change those systems. It's clear that one group is not going to be able to advocate for themselves alone, that instead they're really going to need to have all of us work together on this. And for some, Black Americans, Native Americans, they're going to need more. And I think that's one thing I learned about how I need to change what I do and become much more sensitive about that. So for me personally, that's what I got out of Tamika's comments. I really do praise her for being courageous enough to get this out there. I also know she's really adamant about making sure that her voice is heard. So I'm going to turn back to Kent and have Kent tell us some of the comments that are coming forward and direct them to one or both of us.
Thanks, George, and thanks, Dr. LaSalle, for a really powerful and moving and important presentation for us all here. There are lots of comments in the chat about how important this is, how useful it is, how important it is for teams implementing PBIS to hear this message if they haven't heard it yet. And the thanks from the audience and from us for sharing personally how this has affected you and your family. What I'm going to do is, if you haven't seen here, click over to the polls section, and that's where we'll take Q&A because the chat moves too quickly. But the first question I've got here is, how do we start equity work in schools, understanding that there are other marginalized groups as well, and intersectionality how would you take the initial steps to get started with an equity initiative in your district or in your state?
I'm not sure if I'm on the right screen. Did I stop sharing my screen?
You're sharing your screen, Tamika, but we're seeing it not in presentation mode.
Oh, sorry. 1 second.
Not a problem.
So let me respond while Tamika's trying to figure out her screens. And then I'll turn it back to her because I know she definitely has some ideas about this. And I'm going to speak more generally. And my comment is that, and I said it during the keynote as well, I think you really have to start with a framework that allows us to get the work done. And that means using teams. That means collecting data about what's happening inside your school. That means having focus groups where people have a chance to talk about things that are personally or systemically affecting them. I think unless you contextualize it to your school, it's difficult to do the equity work. It's hard to be able to make it relevant if we take it from a generic perspective. That's one of the reasons I shared sort of my personal response to Tamika, because that's where it all starts. And I think the framework, meaning team-based organizational strategy, using your data for decision-making, look at the images across the school, having kids, family members, and staff members have a voice. That is an excellent, excellent start. You just can't come in and do a 45-minute in-service on equity and assume that's going to change people's beliefs, or give them an opportunity to learn about themselves, or to actually change their practice when they leave that in-service. So I think you just got to start with a groundwork of saying, how do we create the opportunity for the equity work to get started? Because the equity work will have no impact if there's nothing to put your hands on. I'll turn back to Tamika for a more specific response, but I think I'm biased. I think the PBIS framework is the place you got to start as a place to kind of fertilize the ground and plow it a little bit, because otherwise the talk is just going to run off.
Yeah, I absolutely echo what George has said. And I think, so right now I work even across 3 different districts, all using a PBIS framework. And I think that has been critical because it's important to think about things across different tiers, right? And so sometimes without some kind of guiding framework to make decisions, then instead what I get are requests to come in and do a 1-hour PD or to do 2 PDs, and it's not within context. And so instead what I've done, and even though all of these 3 districts operate differently, and the other key thing is, at least in New England, the districts are relatively small. So it's important to have the administrators, and it's important to have the buy-in by the top administrator. So they have all started at the top around what are our guiding principles? What is it that we're standing on, and what activities are we doing that either support that or don't support that? And so that is one of the key things that we've started with, because again, that serves as sort of this anchor for decision making, and we use that to then evaluate data. Like you said, some of it we looked at access to advanced coursework because we know how that links to post-secondary education. Some of it we looked at students who are not graduating, graduation rates, but we also noticed that for certain subgroups, they're not graduating, but they're not dropping out either. So what can we do for those students? And so looking at the data helps to frame both what is it that is working and what is it that's not. But without a framework, I don't think we can say this enough. And I know that we're biased because we work within the technical center, but without a framework, then you have these piecemeal. You have the school climate team and the equity team and the data team, and everybody's working separately. So without a framework where everything can kind of come together and you make decisions based on that, then you end up, and one of the superintendents told me, we've been doing this for 4 years and we end up in the same place every year. And I think that's where the frustration can come in, because we know that there's a problem, there's a need, so we want to jump on it, but slow and steady has been much better than just jumping on it.
Great answers. Great. Let me ask a question that's been asked a few times, and I think it was originally shared by Dr. Holland Sims. Can you discuss the term Black tax and how that impacts Black staff and students in schools? And I might also add Black researchers and Black technical assistance providers in there as well.
Sure. Yeah. So when I talk about Black tax, it's, when certain things happen, the racial unrest, and there's this need to act, then what we see is an increase in asking Black individuals to speak at events, to mentor, to share ideas, to do a webinar, to do PD. And so what happens is, in the context of this like racial unrest, and in the context of things that are happening, Black people have this additional burden then of being able to support others, and it takes away from even being able to support themselves. So it's this additional responsibility that's put on Black people in the midst of the racial unrest, or whatever the incident that's going on. So one of the things that I said is, sometimes how do you, well, one, we talk about like, how do you reimburse or support time for Black individuals if they're doing things, whether you're taking something else off their plate and making sure that they have the right resources. How do you bring resources to them and then help to navigate together? I mean, I've had people who come and they've read something and they want to talk about it. That's one thing versus having me explain, the Cliff Notes version, for example. So there are a number of ways to do that, but I think we all have to be mindful of the additional burden that we put on the very people who are trying to process what's happening.
Great, thank you. And really important. And just so people know, I'm answering all or asking these questions right from the polls tab right in Pathable. If you're interested in, because now we've got a lot of questions, which is wonderful. If there's a particular ones that you go through and you want to have answered, you can click the little thumbs up button, and then that'll indicate that there are more people who want to do that one. So here's another one. I'd love to know your thoughts on school resource officers, and if you view them as contributing to inequity in our schools, especially for Black folk.
Can I respond
George,
first and then turn it over to Tamika? That's a great question, only in part because earlier last part of last week, there was a report that came out indicating the results from a large survey from across the country around the perceptions of school resource officers, and then also a summary of some of that research. First of all, the research is not very comprehensive, but the research that's available basically indicates that school resource officers have not had the positive impact that was expected. More importantly, kids of color feel more afraid at school with police officers on campus than they are feeling supported, which I thought was a fascinating piece of data about what we thought would be safety is now perceived as more of a threat. And the two parts to that to me were, maybe there's a better way for us to create a safe environment, which is Tamika's school climate work, and maybe we're not thinking through what a police officer represents or school resource officer represents to people who are more vulnerable to that particular support system. But there's research out there now saying it's not such a good idea, or at least neutral at best.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what George said. I was reading something recently about the ratio of, the investment that we put into school counselors and school psychologists in schools compared to school resource officers. And I think that there are a lot of discussions about how they're used, and I've heard discussions about using school resource officers as almost as counselors and as support. And I don't feel strongly that way either. I think that there are a lot of discussions to be had about what is the purpose of having school resource officers in school, and based on their training, are they going to be school counselors? No, that's not the goal. But are there other ways that they can be utilized? But I do think that part of the reevaluating resources is, how are we using resources to support counselors and social workers and school psychologists in school, instead of only focusing on focusing on school resource officers. And if we were being really honest, in most schools, the school resource officers, you don't see them in these most positive situations, right? If somebody calls a school resource officer, something bad is going to happen. And so we've seen second graders be handcuffed by school resource officers. So I think that in education in general, there's not a clear understanding of where school resource officers fit. And that's a larger conversation to be had.
Thank you. There are a few questions here. One of them came from the keynote, and then I'm seeing a few here, but I'll ask this first one. We're getting pushback about PBIS being racist, upholding white supremacy. We know this isn't the case when implemented with fidelity and with cultural responsiveness in mind, but what are a few small things PBIS teams can do to be anti-racist in their work? Or in another ways, how do we build PBIS systems that don't just reflect white middle-class values?
Right. So let me answer broadly, then maybe Tamika has some additional, I'm sure she does. I like to think about the world in a triangle, unfortunately. And I think, 85%, 90% of people are willing to have the conversation, around these topics. And there is a proportion of people who probably need a little bit more convincing about what the likelihood of change. And then there are some who are voicing their opinions, but really aren't interested in change or participation in a collaborative conversation. So one of the things I like to think about is having a school team identify a little bit about where the message is coming from and what the intent is behind that message. So they can use their resources smartly to be able to respond. Because I think, frankly, some people are looking for a fight and other people are looking for change. And I think you got to pick your battles. And I really encourage people to take the high road. The second part of my response is, I think the best response we have to many questions about whether or not PBIS works or whether or not it is this or that is our data. And there's three types of data I like to think about. One is kid outcomes. Second one is fidelity data. And the third has to do with sort of the climate or the overall culture of a school. How do people feel about the environments that they're learning in and navigating? The data are the place you have to start with being able to respond to questions about or challenges to the work that you're doing. Because without those data, it's really hard to be able to say, well, this is what the research says, or this is what, you got to start with those data pieces. I like this take the high road approach. And I also like the idea of responding where you think you can have the biggest impact. And I really believe the triangle logic provides enough momentum to respond to most challenges. Tamika?
Yeah, can you, I was trying to unshare my screen. Can you say the first part of the question?
Yeah, so it's how do you respond to people who say that PBIS is white supremacist or is incompatible with cultural responsiveness? And what would you do for teams if they're having that conversation and maybe the data that they're sharing, as George was saying, is not compelling? What's your sort of response to that? Either responding directly to that, or what are the steps that a school team can make to make sure that their systems don't reflect the dominant culture?
White supremacy, right? So I think, to piggyback off of what Kent said, George said, again, PBIS is a guiding framework by which you make decisions, and so those decisions should be contextually driven. I think that gets taken advantage of. Sometimes I think we have schools where they want to say, tell us what to do, and we'll do it. Or, what does it mean for tier 1, or how do we move to tier 2? And George and Lindsay Fallon have 2 articles that came out 2012, I can't remember, a few years ago, that talked about thinking about cultural responsiveness within the context of PBIS. But if you think about it as a framework for making decisions, then part of building that framework is first understanding who are you building it for? Who are your students? What capacity do you have? who are your families, who's in the community, what are your resources? So if you do it with fidelity, then you're innately going to be thinking about those factors. I think that what happens again is that we want to fix things, and we have this nature of wanting to fix it, but we jump forward and moving things. But if you think about making decisions based on your data, and if the data isn't, and we have to be honest about the data, that's the other thing, like what data are you using, and be honest about your data. If the data shows that certain processes are not working for certain students, don't blame it on the students, reevaluate the process. And I think that's part of it too, is that we think that, like, well, we put all this money into this intervention, into these supports, and it's not working for these students, it's the students' fault. Well, part of the iterative process of the PBIS framework is reevaluating the process and not just looking at the outcomes and saying it didn't work for those students. But again, if you're doing it, it's innately framed around building systems that are contextually relevant. And so that, if done correctly, is going to reflect who you have in your building and in your larger community.
I really appreciate that answer. I think that's really useful. And a few people reflecting on that. It's a decision-making framework. So the decisions you have to make when you're prioritizing and lifting up equity in outcomes as one of the things, then you're going to build your systems around that. I appreciate that. How about, I see a few questions here looking at how do we get people who either are unaware of or are resistant to the idea that Black students are being mistreated and that there are acts of racism in schools? How do we get people who are either don't know or have been told but don't believe it? How do we turn those, build support from those educators? Who would like to answer that one first?
I'll respond first. I'll just do a short one. You answered the question partly yourself, Kent, and that is, I think there are people who don't know. That's a matter of helping people understand, you know, what's going on and what's happening in that environment that is triggering those kinds of problems. I mean, people who don't know. So we need to make sure that they are aware of what is happening, and giving them information, giving them examples, giving them data, whatever those things might be. Frankly, those are people I like that are easier to work with because they're curious. They've acknowledged their own nearsightedness or farsight, whatever direction that is, and they're willing to have a conversation around it. I worry about those folks who are not seeing what might be happening with them or others, and how do we help them understand that? I think that's a much more difficult conversation because it requires a confrontational kind of model that is still respectful, yet at the same time saying there may be some differences here that you're not recognizing, or that there's a different way to kind of view this particular problem. My approach has always been, let's take this on together and let's try to think about how we both can try to solve this. But I think there's two different groups you mentioned there, and one is easier than the other. Tamika?
I agree. If you don't know, I think great. Let's go on this journey, and we can we can learn together, because that is a place that I think when I go into schools and work with teachers, 99.9% of teachers want to serve students and sometimes don't know and just want to be supported. And then you have a percent that even if you show them the data, they don't believe it. And that's where I think we have to rely on the systems and the institutions. So again, when we refer back to systemic and institutionalized racism, there have to be systems and institutions in place that create these processes that are consistent. So if you have a personal feeling towards a student, there's still processes and systems in place that need to be followed, and then that provides room for whomever to address it at that level, if that makes sense. So sometimes you have to depersonalize the experience of how you feel towards personal students. I mean, sometimes we have favorites, sometimes we don't. If you feel like there are certain groups that are marginalized, certain groups that are not. But if we have systemic processes that are in place that everyone is expected to be consistent with, then that's how we follow those. And then that gives us grounds for saying, well, you're deviating here, you're deviating here. The other thing I want to say is, in any system, we'd love to have 100% of people on board. There's not always going to be 100% of people on board. We'll settle for the mass, right? Like we'll settle for enough people that will not allow this to be perpetuated. So if a teacher makes a negative comment about Black students, or they're just making this up, or we have to do this again, even if you don't, sometimes I might say, that's not correct. That's not correct. You don't get to say that. But even if you're not there, at least you'll turn around and you'll walk away. What we want is for people to not engage in that dialogue and that sort of teacher's lounge talk. And so you're not always going to get everybody on board. But if you get enough people that can work together within a system that makes sense, that's responsive to the needs of the students, the teachers, and the families, then that will move the system forward. And then those who don't want to jump on board, you have to either move with the tide or you fall out.
All right. This is a little bit of a follow-up question that a few were saying, what does it look like if that person who is resistant to it is your school administrator or district administrator?
So let me respond positively first. And that is, I want to kind of support something that Tamika said. The goal is to get most people moving in the same direction, which I absolutely agree with. And the more you got going, the better. I'm going to do a plug and say that getting that critical mass in the right place, moving in the right direction, requires that the system features be in place, meaning that you have a team, meaning that you have an administrator who engages and models what you're asking the team to do, and vice versa. It means that you use data for decision-making. So for all the PBIS stuff that we love and preach about. We've had many occasions, I shouldn't say many, we've had a few occasions where there have been administrators who don't want to do PBIS, don't believe that there are racial issues inside the school, et cetera, et cetera. What we've started with is, you know what, you got to make sure that the team and the critical mass are moving in the right direction. So the team might say, well, Mr. Sugai is not a supportive principal. Acknowledge that, but continue to move on. You've got to create the opportunities for us to be successful, even though you don't have administrators on board. I like Tamika's idea. If you can show success, then the administrator will buy in. If you start saying, administrator, you're staying out of the way, thank you for being helpful, then you're more likely to get that support. When you have an administrator who requires tier 3 supports, however, then you become more involved with district level systems, and that's why, frankly, PBIS and Kent's work and others now is so focused on districts, because if districts don't have the policies, expectations, and priorities for what we're doing at the school level, then we can't help support the administrators who are on board with that. I'm not sure that's the right answer for the questions being asked, but I think it is about making sure that those systems are in place to allow us to have the opportunity to be able to talk back, if you will.
I would just add, I think you have to evaluate, there's a difference between an administrator who isn't on board, but it will allow the process to move forward with other people, and an administrator that is impeding the ability for the process to move forward. And I think those are two different situations. Sometimes, an administrator, any leader is only as strong as the team around them, right? So if the team around them is really strong and able to move forward, then you can still make progress, even if the head administrator is not jumping on board, and I'm sure they will once it's successful. But if you have an administrator that is actively trying to impede the process, then that's a much more difficult situation, of course, because you need those resources and you need to be able to have that support. There's no easy answer for that. I mean, I could say by default, go back to the data and show and say, this is why we want to do things. I guess instead what I'll say is, think about how you can take small steps moving forward. I've been in schools where PBIS didn't work because they relied on incentives, and they said, well, we don't have incentives. And they said, the administrator said, can we do PBIS again, but call it something else? Because the teachers didn't like it. Said no, they didn't like it because they didn't do it correctly. So, I think part of it is is just being recognizing, is there a gap in like what they think PBIS is and why it didn't work, and do they truly understand it? And sometimes you might take elements and you kind of move things forward. I'm not saying call it something else, but like you still can have a team that reviews data, and you still can have a team that makes decisions, and you still can have a team that makes progress in different ways, and within a framework. And it's not like faking or anything, but you can still do the actions that are necessary, or try to do the actions that are necessary to move forward, even though you'll likely be short on some resources, which I acknowledge.
Can I
Nice.
just comment quickly here, because I know we're running out of time a little bit. I just want to make sure I put a plug in
Absolutely.
for something.
Yeah.
This carries over from the keynote, and something I kind of that I became much more aware of hearing Tamika speak. Right now, we're under a pandemic. Right now, we're asking schools to respond under very difficult conditions. We've got an election coming up. We've got. If people are wondering where they can start, I really think a place to start is with some data that's coming out now saying kids of color are not getting their fair shake under these conditions. They're not getting access to Zoom because they don't, whatever. The kids of color do not have equal opportunity for the responses we're putting in place under the pandemic conditions. A place to start would be to level that playing field and get out there and give kids of color, or anybody else who is disenfranchised, access to what everybody else is supposed to be getting. I really worry that we're just perpetuating the gaps in this new condition called the pandemic. To me, right now is a great opportunity to say, we have this need. We are losing kids and families because of the pandemic. And those kids and families we're losing happen to be kids and families of color. What can we do now to strategically level the playing field with respect to opportunities? So I just want to put a plug out there. If you don't know where to start, we have this problem right now that is going to be escalating into a really bad place unless we respond. And I think this is a great opportunity to take that on. Sorry to interrupt with that, but I just wanted to put that plug in there.
Yeah, I agree.
And of course, I'll put a plug in for the equity strand tomorrow, and the talking with, I know there was a question we didn't quite get to on how do we reach out for families. And so there is actually a session in the family strand looking at bringing voices of under-resourced families into the conversation. So there is more, it's available. I think we'll sort of leave for a couple of closing words, but if you can see on the screen, we're hoping that you will complete the session evaluation. You can do it right here. You can click on the link, and if you're in Pathable right now, you just click on the Take Survey, and it'll get you right in there. I know this has been great. I know we don't have all of the time in the world to answer questions, but I'd love to leave each of you a chance for a closing comment each on your thoughts.
All right, I'll start. And my comment has two parts to it. One is Tamika, at least I think so. Tamika and I are friends. And I want to say that her presentation helped me learn a whole lot more about her and a whole lot about the things I need to be thinking about with respect to how I navigate the world. So I appreciate that very much, Tamika, because there's, we don't really learn unless we have a chance to interact with each other and have these conversations. So I really do appreciate your comments. Second part is, I hope each of the participants in this session and in the keynote earlier, take a look in the mirror, ask yourselves a little bit about their working environment, take a look at their learning history, and ask themselves the question of, how do we make sure that we are giving opportunities to kids and families that really need that extra opportunity? Because right now the opportunities are stacked against them. So I ask you to think about tangible activities that you can engage in on Monday to take this on. Words are great, but actions are where it's really at. Thank you all of you for participating. I appreciate the comments. Tamika, you get to close up with comments.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, I mean, one, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this and for the center's support in this, and to be able to do this with George and Kent is incredibly humbling. One of the things that I'll say, people ask sometimes, even districts that have reached out, they say, well, I want to do this work, but what about people say that we're just doing it just because of what's been happening in the last couple months, or just because. No, we don't care why you're starting, just start. You know, if it was because of something that happened, if it was because of George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery or something you saw in your neighborhood, nobody's judging you for how long it's taken you to start. Just start, and don't worry about any of that, and just move forward. The other thing that I'll say is do so in combination with other people. This isn't something that you have to do alone. So try to get people in your school on board so that you can navigate this process. But like George said, do something. If somebody, who cares what the reason is or what prompted you, it's never too late. Just do something.
Powerful and important words. Next steps, what to do. We're not going to sit in and do nothing when we hear this. We're moving forward and changing our systems. So thank you both. Really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody for engaging in chat and Q&A, and look forward to interacting with you all throughout the session. Just a quick FYI, the video will be available in about 10 minutes, and also files for download, and then things will move over to pbis.org soon enough. So thanks again, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you too, Kent. Appreciate your help on kind of funneling everything.
Agree. Thank you. Are we leaving here? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Great session.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Yeah, Trish, I forgot to thank you as well.
Absolutely. Great session and great keynote. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. I'm going to check out. See you later.